The Saturday Headlines segment on Hockey Night in Canada offered us a lot of interesting information. The Toronto Maple Leafs are going to have some very interesting roster or trade moves they have to make in the next 10 days. Plus, we also have some news and rumors regarding the Minnesota Wild and the New York Islanders. We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we had a variety of interesting topics covered in tonight's Saturday Headline segment on Hockey Night in Canada. And I want to get started first of all with what they had to say regarding the Minnesota Wild. Now, first of all, as we know, the Wild's got off to a dreadful start. They're certainly not having a wild start to the season with a 1-6 record. I know GM Bill Guerin's been getting a lot of phone calls. They indicated on the segment that he's getting all kinds of calls with all kinds of potential trade chatter. But so far, they're saying he vows to remain patient and doesn't want to make an emotional trade just for the sake of making a trade to try to shake things up. I mean, also we saw some comments from forward Jason Zucker the other day, which kind of created a little bit of a controversy where he indicated that everybody from Bruce on down needed to be better. He said Bruce needs to be better, the players need to be better, everybody needs to be better, which I think really his comments were coming from the right place, meaning that as an organization, everything needs to get better and improve for them to have any chance in turning things around. I don't really think he meant to call out the coach, but obviously after he made those comments, a lot of media people kind of put a spin on it and a lot of reactions through social media from different fans, etc. and kind of created a bit of controversy. But as we know and what we've seen through this segment as well as other reports, it looks as though Boudreau and Zucker have talked this out and certainly seem to be just fine and seem to be having a laugh about it afterwards, where he indicated that he did not have any intention of calling out the coach. That wasn't really what he was going for. He was just trying to make sure kind of get everybody going and to say that everything, including the coaching and everybody, the whole organization needs to be better. So I really don't think Zucker's got anything to worry about. I know he's been subject of trade rumors for a long time, was nearly traded by the previous GM on multiple occasions, but I don't think Bill Guerin is really going to be trying to move him or really do anything because of those comments. So I know there's been a lot of chatter around that player and those remarks online over the last day or so. But anyways, regarding the Wild, Bill Guerin apparently will remain to be patient here. Really, if you take a look at his roster, though, in my opinion, it really needs to be kind of be torn down. They really need a fresh rebuild. They need to kind of go into the tank this year, in my opinion, and really get themselves a high draft pick. They really need a high impact player somewhere in that lineup, and they just don't have a lot. Besides Gabriel Kaprizov, who is apparently coming over next year, they just don't have a whole heck of a lot in the prospect pool, and there's just not a whole lot of tradable contracts on that team. They have a lot of players that are aging, have big money contracts, and at this point are just not overly tradable. The guys got like Parise, and you get Ryan Suter, who's still a pretty good horse back there in the blue line. You got Zach Parise, who's often injured, but when in the lineup has been fairly productive. They signed Matt Zuccarello as a UFA this past offseason. Now he's hurt and on injury reserve as well. And they just signed Jared Spurgeon, who's in his late 20s, to a multi-year big-time contract extension. So ultimately, in my opinion, I just don't think the Wild have a whole lot they can do. The players that probably would generate the trade interest are probably guys you'd want to keep and try to build around and be part of the solution here. So it's really Bill Guerin, I think, has got a really tough job for his first stint as an NHL general manager to take over the team was really tanking to start the year and have all those players on that roster. I think it's just a really tough situation, but the main story here is that even though there's been lots of talk about the Wild, lots of trade rumors, he says he's going to remain to be patient and is not going to make an emotional trade. There's also been a lot of talk about Bruce Boudreau being on the hot seat. Could he be let go? He is in the final year of his contract right now with the Wild, but he does have a couple more years on the contract that would be supposed to be as a consultant, which I think he would probably prefer to be behind the bench based on what the initial reports are. But it is possible that maybe he leaves the Wild after this year, but I don't think they're going to be in a big hurry to let him go. So it doesn't sound like they're going to be in a big hurry to make a coaching change either. It wouldn't be surprising if this is his final year with the Wild, but if they do decide to make a coaching change, I mean, he has been known to turn other teams around in the past, and with his history and success he's had elsewhere, I really do think he likely would get another job probably fairly quick if he was let go by the Wild. But it looks as though they're going to stand pat, and we'll probably hear lots of talk, lots of rumors about potential deals, but Guerin's not going to be in any kind of hurry here. Now, regarding the New York Islanders, been some talk about forward Matthew Barzal and the fact that the Islanders are really interested in signing him to a long-term contract extension, which is obviously going to cost them a fair bit of money. We saw the New Jersey Devils do this with Nico Hischier. That deal was announced yesterday. where he signed a 7-year, $50 million plus contract with the Devils on Friday. So obviously that's a big time contract. I know some people were kind of thinking it was a lot of money, but he is a really solid two-way center for his age and is likely going to project to be a potential Selke type trophy two-way center iceman. He's really solid on both ends of the ice. In his offensive production, it's only going to continue to grow. I do think in a couple of years' time this contract will look good, but I do think there is some risk associated. But obviously contracts like that are certainly going to be used in the Barzal negotiations. And the other big thing that Matthew Barzal has going for him here is that after 2 years of NHL experience, he's further ahead point production-wise than Mitch Marner was when he was at the same spot in his career. Now, of course, we saw Mitch Marner get a mega contract from the Leafs this offseason, but largely most of that is due to the fact that he had such a big year in year 3. Of course, Barzal's only at the beginning of year 3, so I think it probably would be wise for the Islanders to get ahead of this if they can and get him locked up now. If he does have a big year for the Islanders and really explode like Marner did last year, they could really end up costing him a lot more money than they very well could if they were to get it done sooner than later. But after this offseason that we had, and we saw all those RFA contracts really drag on, and many of them get done right near the season as it was getting underway. We saw a little bit of a different trend since the season started, with many of next year's potential RFAs getting signed to longer term deals and NHL teams really getting ahead of this. So we'll see if the Islanders and Barzal can hammer out a contract. I do think it'd be wise for them to do that so they can hopefully get a better deal in the books and they don't end up in a situation like the Leafs were with Marner next offseason. Now, jumping over to the Toronto Maple Leafs, which was kicked off the segment here for Saturday headlines. Obviously, they're going to have a lot of tough decisions to make. They're up against the salary cap pretty hard here, and the only reason they're cap compliant right now is because of all the relief they're getting through the long-term injury reserve program. Now, of course, two of the players that are on that will be returning soon, and that's defenseman Travis Dermott and forward Zach Hyman. Now, to go on long-term injury reserve, you do have to be on there for a minimum of 24 days. Of course, they were on it effective October 2nd when the season started, so they will not be eligible to return until October the 26th, even if they're healthy and ready to go ahead of that, which they're saying it very well could be the case. So when they're ready to return on the 26th, which seems likely at this point, they're going to have some other tough roster decisions that they have to make. Forward Nick Petan and defenseman Kevin Gravel have already cleared waivers, so they're able to go down to the Marlies without going through that process here yet again, but that's not going to clear enough salary cap space to bring both the Hyman and Dermott contracts back. They're only making just over $700,000 each, so they're looking at about $1.4 million between the two. They need to clear about $3 million worth of space, and many of their guys playing in the bottom six or third pair defense are only making, between $700,000 to $1 million per year, so it's going to take probably up to 4 roster spots to be cleared in order to bring back 2 players. They're currently carrying 23 men on the roster right now, and they're going to end up dropping down to 21 once this kicks in here. Now, of course, John Tavares very well could end up on long-term injury reserve, depending on how long he takes, but right now they're only saying about 2 weeks, so they're not going to make that move and force him to be out for 24 days if he doesn't need to be. So when these other 2 players are ready to come back, they're going to have some hard decisions. So it's pretty safe to say that with Petan and Gravel already cleared waivers, they will be going to the Marlies. But then you get other players like Shore and Spezza and Timashov, possibly Marinson or Hall. 2 of those players are going to end up having to be moved off the roster in one capacity or another. So we could see any of those guys could put on waivers, which they would be required in order to be cleared to go down to the Marlies in the American Hockey League. Well, of course, if that's the case, they could be risk being claimed. And of course, there's always the possibility that the Maple Leafs could make a trade and move them off the roster that way, and they would not really be able to take anything back in a trade that would immediately count against their cap on the salary cap immediately. So they'll have to be looking at a prospect or a draft pick or something to that effect. So I would think that they probably wouldn't want to move like a guy like Timashov or a guy like Spezza. I mean, Spezza was just signed as a veteran deal. I know he hasn't been playing a ton, but with Tavares out, his role is going to be even more important in the short term. And so I guess the question I pose to you is, what do the Leafs do with their roster to create the necessary space for Travis Dermott and Zach Hyman and to return? I mean, do the Leafs go ahead and make some trades? Do they use the waiver wire? I do think a lot of these guys that could go on waivers would certainly be highly risky to be claimed by other teams, so they could lose them for nothing. So we'll see what Kyle Dubas and company will do here if they can work some salary cap magic. I mean, there's always a possibility something else can happen in the interim with any other injuries, or like I said, like the John Tavares situations, not worthy of going on LTIR, so obviously that's not helping them buy any more time to make these decisions. But they obviously are going to be down on the roster size because of the cap, and that certainly does create an issue for Kyle Dubas to kind of work some magic. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. Who do the Maple Leafs move off the roster? Do they use the waiver wire? Do they trade some players out? Who do you think is likely to go? And what will their roster look like once that's completed? So that is all your updates from Saturday headlines here for this weekend. So certainly want to know your thoughts and opinions and everything down in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts are, and we'll continue the conversation in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future videos. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.